welcome to this week's edition of Income is the Outcome with Tim Whistler, where we believe it's not how much you earn, it's how much you keep. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley, and joining me in the studio is the president and founder of the Whistler Agency, Tim Whistler. We've got a great show for you today. The title of today's show is Taxation in Retirement. Are you ready for it? This is going to be a jam-packed conversation, so buckle up. Tim, my friend, great to be back in the studio with you. How are you this week?
I'm well, Kristen. How about you?
I'm doing well, thank you. And I know we were talking before today's show. This is a subject that you're very passionate about. We're probably both going to get pretty fired up, and that's a good thing, right?
Yes, I think it could easily happen. Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Because when it comes to this time of our plan, of our life, we have deferred taxes in the majority of our accounts, right? We follow the rules. We're taking these deductions as we're building wealth. And it reminds me of the story, the very first time our youngest son, Cade, brought home his first paycheck from Taco Bell.
Okay, yep.
Brings it home. He's like, he pulls this out. He's all excited. He pulls out of the envelope. He's like, Dad, what are all these deductions?
Yes.
Welcome to adulthood, buddy.
Right? Yeah, who is FICA and why do they take all my money, right?
That's exactly right. So, it's the same type of thing, as we start talking about tax planning, we just want people to be aware of what was the trade-off when it comes to deferring our taxes. Now we start to take income in retirement and we have to pay those taxes.
Absolutely. So as we set up today's conversation, I think it's really important to just help our viewers understand that there is a difference between tax preparation and engaging in strategic tax planning, which is what you do. So can you define and describe that difference?
Sure, absolutely. So when you think in terms of tax preparation, that's when you go to your TurboTax software, or you go to your CPA or bookkeeper, and they look at all your returns for that calendar year. And again, they're looking at it through the lens of the micro lens. So they're looking at it through today's tax dollars. And their focus is trying to reduce your tax bill for that current year.
Right.
That's fine. Where we come in is we're looking at it from the macro view, the big picture, the holistic view. Tax planning for decades of retirement savings.
Yes.
and retirement withdrawals
Yep.
from those savings. So therefore, tax planning is very much a proactive type of an approach, not just looking at your statements that you have in retirement, but also too understanding that when we start taking distributions, we probably want to be aware of how the IRS is going to get involved with every distribution.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Why is it so important for folks to be proactive and to pay attention to their potential tax bill in retirement?
It's one of those variables that we just have no idea how big this thing could grow. It can grow from a variety of different multitudes. Like, for example, number one, what we call legislative risk. Right? We've talked about this before, and I'll say it again. The Constitution was written in ink, but the IRS uses a pencil. They're going to determine how much you get to keep when you start taking income from your assets. Then you look at time. I think in terms of a recent conversation I had with somebody who's just about ready to turn 60 this year. And based upon their year of birth, their RMD age, required minimum distribution age, is 75. So that tax-deferred account has another 15 years to grow, and also what's growing with that tax liability.
Right.
So those are the different types of variables that we want to be aware of as we're starting to think about what might that ramification be if we don't elect to do some tax planning sooner than later.
Right, and I think that's the issue, right? A lot of folks are sitting on a ticking tax time bomb. They have no idea because the majority of Americans have the bulk of their wealth saved up in these types of tax-deferred accounts. Maybe you have a 401k, a 403b, traditional IRA, things of that nature. And what folks don't realize is not all of that money is yours. If it's tax-deferred, you have a silent partner who very quickly becomes not so silent, Uncle Sam.
That's right. And that's where I kind of remind people, when is $1 million not worth $1 million? When it's inside of a tax-deferred account.
Yep.
That's why our tagline has been just consistent through all these years. It's not how much you earn, it's how much you keep.
Yes.
And it's the same thing when it comes time for this time of life. When now you start taking withdrawals from these, you're going to be told how much you get to keep because of all those different variables that come into play. That's why I think if people can be proactive on looking at this and saying, this is what it is, regardless if we like it or not, it is what it is. We have to understand that we need to look at those dollars that you've saved for decades and start putting a plan together. So as we start taking income, we're going to hopefully pay the least amount of taxes as we can, again, for the entire time that we're retired.
Right, and the point is that we don't want folks to pay any more to the IRS than you are legally required to pay. We're not talking about tax evasion here, okay? What we're doing is talking about being strategic, being proactive, looking ahead to see how you can start to even reduce your potential tax liability in retirement even today. And another point is it's it's really key for people to understand how each dollar they own is going to be taxed. So a lot of folks enter retirement with 3 types of accounts. So let's go through these 3 types of accounts. The first one we have are taxable accounts. Explain what falls into that category.
So when you think of taxable account, this is the money that you earn each year. Okay, so this is like you might have a high interest savings account. You might have a money market fund. You might have a CD, right? When the CD matures, guess what comes along with that? That I'm telling on you form, where you have to pay taxes on the gain.
I
right?
haven't heard it that way, but that's a great way to say it. I'm telling on you form.
I'm telling on, that's right. They're going to tell
Right.
on you, and you're going to have to pay those taxes.
Yep.
And another one is what I see quite common is when, for example, husband and wife together might take some after-tax dollars and put together a joint account. So basically like an account that you have some stocks, some bonds, maybe some mutual funds, or maybe ETFs in kind of what they call a non-qualified account. You know, so those are the different types of characteristics that kind of encapsulate what we mean when we talk about a taxable account.
Okay, all right, so that's the first category, taxable. Now, as we said, the second type is the type that most folks have the bulk of their wealth accumulated in, those tax-deferred accounts, and a lot goes into these.
Yes, you know, and this is the one where there's that trade-off. If we decide to put some dollars in a tax-deferred account, we basically get a little bit of a tax break in the year that we're doing that. Okay? So again, we're kicking that can down the road, if you will, a little bit. And so you think about, you know, what do these dollars look like? And how I try to explain this to people is think of these dollars as residing in that, what we call that forever taxed bucket. Right? Those dollars are always going to be taxed every time you take a distribution from them as long as account value resides in those accounts. And what type of accounts am I referring to? I'm talking about your pre-tax 401k, right? And other workplace types of plans like maybe a 403b, maybe a TSP. Maybe now you've taken a 401k that you've rolled into your own traditional IRA. All of those characteristics, they might be titled differently, but they have the same principle being tax deferred, which means, again, when you take income from that account down the road, here comes the IRS.
Right, absolutely. Okay, so we've got the taxable accounts, we have the tax-deferred accounts. Now it's time to talk about our favorite bucket of money, which is?
Tax-free.
Tax-free, all right.
Saving the best for last.
Yes,
right?
so what falls into that category?
So this is what we're trying to talk about. And anytime I always enjoy this conversation with the younger crowd, right? The young adults, the Henrys, the high earners, not rich yet, right? I love talking with these folks because I'm just always trying to drive home 2 words: tax-free. Make sure that you start understanding that if you kick that tax can down the road, that tax bill might become quite sizable down the road. So
Yes.
what can we do today to build tax-free income? Well, again, that tax-free bucket basically means it's never taxed. So how do we get dollars into that account? We can take advantage of maybe, like, for example, a Roth 401k, you know, maybe a Roth IRA. And the third vehicle that maybe some folks aren't really as familiar with is when you can take advantage of the cash value inside of a permanent life insurance policy. And I know I said the bad word, life insurance, right? We're not talking so much about, you know, making sure that somebody is okay financially if somebody passes away too soon. I'm talking about building equity inside of a product that over time builds value, and then at the right time, you actually can take the value of that and generate some tax-free income in retirement.
And that's also a great way to pass on tax-free income to your heirs potentially too, right?
Absolutely right. It's a great strategy to do that because, again, the IRA owner, those dollars, when the IRA owner passes away, the IRS does not go away.
Yeah.
The IRS attaches themselves to that, and they will continue to follow that account no matter who owns it.
Right, unless it's a Roth IRA.
Unless
right?
it's a
Just
Roth
to
IRA,
clarify
that's
that.
exactly right. Yep,
Yes,
that's right.
all right. Well, we have so much more to get into, and I think part of the issue that we need to tackle today is solutions for folks, especially if that's you. If you have the majority of your wealth sitting in these tax-deferred accounts, it's understanding what that potential tax bill might be and what steps you can begin to take now to reduce that. So the rest of the show is going to be focused on some of those solutions. But if folks are watching today and going, you know what, I've never had these kinds of conversations with a financial professional before. We know that that's really common, right? A lot of people don't engage in this tax planning conversation. Right. What would you say to someone who's needing help in that area?
You know, I think the best thing that we can do today is make sure that you pick up the phone and take action. Just do exactly what other clients have done who work with us. They just took the first step. And the first step is picking up the phone, dialing the number on your screen, and getting on our calendar, just so we can have that conversation, so we can bring something to your attention that maybe you weren't aware of. You know, we have the opportunity to look at your accounts from a holistic point of view. What accounts do you own that are taxable, tax-deferred, and tax-free? And then we can start creating that income, you know, plan for you that's also the most important part of it in a tax-efficient manner. So be sure to take advantage of that. We'd love to sit down with you, meet with you, and help you put together that tax planning conversation.
Wonderful. Tim, thank you so much. To our viewers at home, to be able to claim your complimentary written financial plan from Tim and the team of the Whistler Agency, it's so simple. All you need to do is pick up the phone and call that number you see on the bottom of your screen, 888-992-7872. Or if you'd rather connect online, we've got you covered. If you simply pull out your smartphone, you can open up that camera app. Just point, click, and scan that QR code that you see there down in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. That will take you over to a landing page, ask you a few short, simple questions, and then a member of the team from the Whistler Agency will reach out to connect with you to schedule your complimentary meeting that way as well. And of course, we're talking specifically on taxes today, but when you come in and sit down, any questions you have regarding your financial situation, Tim will be glad to help guide you through those. We've got a lot more to cover. When we come back, we're going to be diving into some solutions for how you can begin to lower your tax liability even today. Stay with us. We'll be back right after this.
Good morning, Ben.
Good morning, Ben. Hey, birthday party for Carol and 5. Happy birthday to you.
Good morning, Ben. Happy Monday.
Daryl's birthday, be there or be square. Happy birthday to you. As you can see from our quarterly report on slide number 62, we're trending in the right direction. All signs point to a very positive outlook for the next several years. If you peel back the onion...
Ben, do you have anything to add?
The work never seems to end until the day it finally does. Call today to get your free written financial plan so you may live every day to the fullest and enjoy the retirement of your dreams.
Welcome back. You're watching Income is the Outcome with Tim Whistler. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley, and today Tim and I are discussing taxation in retirement. Are you ready for it? And we mentioned before the break the opportunity for you to come in and sit down with Tim and receive your very own complimentary written financial plan. Of course, as part of that, he's going to be able to engage in the strategic tax planning conversation with you. But you're also going to get a complimentary copy of Tim's book, License to Spend. Now, this is a great read. It's about having a retirement plan based on income, not ifcome. Because really, at the end of the day, as we say on the show, it's all about income, isn't it?
That's exactly right. Yep,
Yes.
That's right.
And I know you talk about taxes in this book as well.
We do. We don't really go real deep into it just for the fact we're just trying to create awareness of what people need to be mindful of when it comes to looking at all those statements that we have and understanding how there is going to be a strategy that we'll recommend when it comes to taking withdrawals from them, again, based upon how the IRS can or may not be involved in each withdrawal.
Absolutely. Well, we talked in the last segment about the 3 different types of accounts that most folks enter retirement into, and it's really important to understand how each of those dollars is going to be taxed. This can have a huge impact on your withdrawal strategy, knowing how much to withdraw from which account at what point in time. And I know we're going to be getting into some more solutions and tools for tax control today, but before we do, why is this such a time-sensitive conversation for folks right now?
You know, when you look at what I've always called it being legislative risk, you are truly at the mercy of what Congress will dictate when it comes to tax law. And you think in terms of current law, the Secure Act, the Secure Act 2.0, the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, right? So that current piece of legislation is due to sunset at the end of 2025. Which means once we flip that calendar to January of 2026, we are going to go back to what the tax brackets were prior to this current act being enforced. Now that should grab our attention, because if Congress doesn't do anything about it, tax rates are going up, brackets are going up, deductions are coming down. So we're just trying to get this message out to clients as fast as we can by saying, look, the clock is ticking, right? We're not trying to create a deadline or put pressure on people. Just be mindful of the fact that legislative risk right now is very real, and we want to be mindful of what could be happening here in the not too distant future.
Right. And again, if you don't have your own proactive tax plan in place, guess what? The government has one for you, and it's in their favor. It's not in yours. You know, we've talked on previous shows that the statistics show there's almost $40 trillion currently sitting in these types of tax-deferred accounts. The government knows this, and they are hungry, given that we are $35 trillion in debt and counting, right? I mean, it would be amazing if taxes went down, but I think a lot of folks are just looking at this clock and going, yeah, the current tax cuts are set to sunset at the end of 2025. So the point is, what can we be doing right now to take advantage of where tax rates are?
You know, I think we need to sit down and have that conversation. And I always like to throw this disclaimer out there. It may not be the most fun conversation you've ever had, because we're talking about something that we cannot control. And we're talking about something that basically dictates, again, how much we have to spend, or give away, I should say, in taxes. So, you know, one of the things that we talk about is just being mindful of where things are at right now. And one of the pieces of paper I have right here in front of me is just basically a snapshot of the history of U.S. tax rates.
Yes.
And just as we bring this full circle into present day, just to your point, you mentioned the deficit. We also look at what's the highest tax rate right now in today's bracket, and it's 37%. You look back at history, and again, that's how we learn, is we're more mindful of history. At the end of World War II, the highest tax bracket we had at that point was 94%. In 1945, there's a 94% tax bracket. Can you imagine?
I know.
For every $100 you earn, you got to keep 6?
Yep.
I mean, now, was the deficit as high then as it is today? No, we came out of World War II, so our deficit at that point was higher, but it started to reduce over time. Why? Because we had higher tax brackets. Now you kind of lay that on top of today's current events. The highest tax bracket today is 37%. We have $35 trillion in deficit, and according to the math, every 100 days, another $1 trillion gets added. So you have to ask yourself, when you're looking at your statements and you see that tax-deferred title staring at you on that page, you have to ask yourself, what do you think taxes are going to do in retirement? We don't have the crystal ball. We have no idea. All we can do is simply use a little bit of math, a little bit of logic behind it, and say, look, maybe we should have that conversation just so that we're not caught off guard down the road and not have to pay a huge amount of money each year every time we take a withdrawal from those tax-deferred accounts.
Absolutely. And I think it's so important to not forget that we have to look at this from that comprehensive, holistic perspective, because, you know, we say this on the show a lot. How you make a decision in one area of your financial life can and will affect all the others. Taxes are a perfect example of why that is. You know, I think, Tim, obviously, if you have more money, like taking out of a tax-deferred account, right, you can be bumped into a higher tax bracket. But talk about the impact that could have on Social Security, Medicare premiums. I mean, it can affect so much.
Absolutely. It almost turns into a pretty nasty snowball once it starts to compound and build. And to your point, you know, Social Security, if we make too much money in retirement, too much income each year, it can impact your Social Security benefits.
Yeah, up to 85% of your benefit could be taxed. A lot of people don't realize that.
No, they do not realize that. That's why we kind of talk a little bit about Social Security planning. You know, be mindful of that. You know, turning on your income from Social Security prior to full retirement age and also working. It all kind of works together. You mentioned Medicare, right? That milestone of turning 65, going into Medicare. Now, what people are being faced with a lot of people who have higher value IRA accounts, is now all of a sudden, hey, you get a pat on the back from the IRS that says, congratulations on doing so well saving for retirement. Now we're going to penalize you in your Medicare premiums because you're taking too much money for distributions from your tax-deferred accounts. And again, so that's why tax planning is so critical, because most people don't understand that your current year of your Medicare premiums is determined by what your income was 2 years ago.
Yes, there's a 2-year look back.
And it resets every 2 years. So I remember talking to a gentleman not too long ago who had a tax planning conversation with a professional who had no idea how Medicare and the IRS worked together. And needless to say, he was very, very disappointed when all of a sudden he gets that big bill from Medicare the next year, not even aware that could happen. So there's a lot of side effects from these tax-deferred accounts in our retirement years.
Yes, and this is why you have to plan for all of these pieces,
It's
right?
critical. It's absolutely critical, yes.
Well, if someone's out there going, you know what, we realize a lot of you might already be working with another financial advisor, but maybe they're not having these kinds of conversations with you. I know, Tim, that a lot of financial professionals, especially if they're working for the bigger, more corporate firms, they're literally told they can't have these kinds of tax planning conversations with their clients, right?
That's exactly right. And that's why, again, we've just trying to encourage people to understand that's how our practice is positioned. We're independent. We look at things from a holistic point of view, and we serve you with a fiduciary responsibility. And part of that overall income written plan is going to include how much the IRS will allow you to keep when you start taking income for retirement. So again, if you've not had this tax planning conversation with anybody, or maybe it's been a while since you've had it, let's sit down and talk through this. Let's get together, go through the discovery, understand exactly all the different accounts that you have, what are the tax classifications of each account, and put together a tax-efficient income plan for your retirement.
Absolutely. Tim, thank you so much. Very well said. It's all about creating greater tax efficiency for you throughout your full financial plan. So if you would like to claim your complimentary written financial plan, again, that number to call is there on the bottom of your screen, 888-992-7872. Or again, you're also welcome to scan that QR code and that will get you connected as well. When we come back, we're going to be diving into some tools for tax control. What do you have in your tax control toolbox? Stay with us to hear what Tim has to say about solutions for you.
The work never seems to end until the day it finally does. After nearly a lifetime on the job, you should be rewarded for all the time you spent working. Whether that's crossing off items on your bucket list, learning a new passion, or rekindling the love of an old one. After all, life isn't over when you stop working. It's the start of an all-new chapter. The one where you're the writer and you get to choose how your story will go. A way to achieve that is by having a clear financial plan to sustain your golden years. The biggest fear most retirees have is if they'll have enough money to maintain the lifestyle they've always enjoyed. Having a plan to help protect you against the curveballs life often throws will help to maintain your lifestyle. Call today to get your free written financial plan so you may live every day to the fullest and enjoy the retirement of your dreams.
Welcome back to Income is the Outcome with Tim Whistler. I'm Kristen Oakley, and today we've been talking all about taxation in retirement. Are you ready for it? And I think we've done a pretty good job, Tim, of setting up the problem that today's retirees are facing from a tax perspective. Let's talk about some solutions. Yep. What are the options available for folks, and how do you help clients engage in the strategic tax planning so that folks can actually go ahead and start lowering their potential tax bill in retirement?
You know, it's one of the things that we go through, and we don't just look at one aspect of what a client has. Their overall portfolio is one part of the aspect. The other part of it is, okay, how much income do we want to take in retirement? Number two, what is the value of our tax-deferred accounts that at some point down the road, the IRS is going to come knocking on your door and saying, hey, remember us? You have to start taking some income from this guy. So therefore, we just want to take a holistic point of view and say, let's start talking about how we can possibly consider lowering future tax liability. And one of the ways that we can do that is, again, making that transition. That's the favorite transition in my practice. Taking the dollars from that forever tax bucket and transitioning into that never tax bucket. Now, it's not a fun journey to get there because we have to pay the IRS a portion of that, but that's why we talk through that planning process to understand, does it make sense for us to do that? This is not a one-size-fits-all. You might be sitting here watching this and thinking, well, is my tax bill large enough to even have that tax planning conversation? I don't know. We need to meet and talk through that because a Roth conversion is not for everybody. But that's one of the solutions that we can provide to see whether or not it makes sense to execute that type of a strategy for a reduction of future tax liability.
Right. Well, and the reason it's not ever fun is because no one ever likes to pay taxes, right? And I think it can be really challenging and hard to stomach to think about paying the tax now. But as we shared earlier, with tax rates being the third lowest brackets we've had in the history of our country, this is why for so many folks it's making sense to systematically over time start moving that money from the tax forever bucket to the tax never bucket and just getting that silent partner, getting Uncle Sam out of the deal, right? So that money can compound and continue to grow tax-free.
That's exactly right. And again, it's you said it well just a second ago. It's not something a lot of people don't like to stomach. They just don't want to deal with it. And that's perfectly fine. Again, we don't sit here and try to take the position of telling people what they should do or what they need to do. We're just simply saying, hey, let's look at the numbers and provide some potential solutions, for that type of conversation. Because again, it may not make sense for everybody. But when you start looking at the numbers from a big picture, again, not through the lenses of year to year to year, but I'm talking over decades, the number will shock you. Accordingly. And then, like I said before, if that number gets too large, now all of a sudden it can lower how much you get to keep from Social Security, and it can cause more of a fee to your Medicare premiums, and that's not a fun day to go through. So it's like Ed Slott says, do you want to be kind of irritated and annoyed for a few years or for several decades? And that's the approach that we want to take. And let's have the conversation, go through the numbers, and see what might be the best solution again, trying to reduce those mandatory taxes.
And let me ask you this question, because obviously there's pros and cons to every decision. When is a Roth conversion maybe, like who is not a good candidate for that? Is there ever times where you sit down with someone and you're like, you know what, actually that doesn't make sense for you?
Right, and actually that's a great point, because one of the documents that I have from Ed Slott's team, I love the kind of the Shakespeare feel to it. To convert or not to convert?
Yes,
right?
That is the question.
That's right. So, one of the questions that I would ask somebody is, okay, when are you going to need income from your investments? And if there is a bucket of money, the largest bucket of money is going to provide you with the most income you need, that may not be the strategy that we employ with doing a Roth conversion, because if we need those dollars immediately and we don't have time for those dollars to be reset in some type of a tax-free vehicle, that may not be the right strategy. Right? So that's one solution where maybe a Roth conversion is not right for somebody. Another one is what you said before. Some people just can't stomach the thought of paying more taxes. So therefore they're like, you know what? I'm going to pay the taxes that I owe this year, and I'll worry about next year. That's perfectly fine. So I think it's timing. I think there's some psychological, element to it as well. And again, at the big picture, if we have assets that are tax deferred that are not going to be used for income, that's where we might want to consider that Roth conversion conversations, again, just to maybe try to reduce that overall tax bill.
Yes, I know we talked on a previous show too, especially for folks who are planning to maybe pass on that money to their children, for example, because now that tax burden gets passed on to the kids. Right. No longer can they stretch that out over their lifetime. They have to liquidate that account within 10 years. That can create a huge tax burden for them.
That's exactly right. So even though, we don't know when we're going to slip into eternity, right? If we knew that date, obviously planning would be a little bit simpler. But what I always like to remind my clients is say, look, if you've got a legacy plan in mind for your kids and you'd like to leave more for them than to the IRS, and again, if you have that bucket of money that's not really vital for you to have income during your retirement years, we can start that Roth conversion process. So therefore, whenever those dollars pass on to mom and dad, husband and wife, down to the kids, the non-spouse beneficiaries, now all of a sudden you've created less of a tax liability for your kids. Because like I said before, when IRA dollars are passed down from one generation to the next, they latch right onto the new account owner. And now all of a sudden with the elimination of the stretch IRA, that now becomes their tax burden. Right. So it's just one of the things where we can talk through that. Does it make sense for current income? Does it make sense for legacy planning?
For sure. So much goes into this conversation, and clearly it's an individual case-by-case basis, right?
Absolutely. That's right.
Well, I'm excited for more folks to be able to come in and have this important conversation with you. So Tim, thank you so much. And thank you for joining us. Again, to claim your complimentary written financial plan, all you have to do is call that number on the bottom of your screen, 888-992-7872. If you're already working with another financial professional and they are not having these kinds of conversations with you, it's time to get a second opinion, and Tim would love to be able to help and provide that for you. Be safe, be happy, be blessed. We look forward to being back with you next time here on Income is the Outcome.